Good morning, folks. It is a beautiful day here, even though it's raining a little bit. We're grateful the Lord has brought us together here as the church, even though we're not together as the church. I know these are difficult times and unusual times, but each time we are together as the body, it is a very unique and special time, and we may be separate physically, but we are certainly together spiritually, and we're glad that you are with us here this morning. For those of us who have been raised in the church, one of the things that we've always heard about is trust in God. One of the cornerstones of our faith is trusting in the Lord, and it's evident in even the most cursory, basic reading of Scripture that there's a fundamental confidence in God is kind of at the center of our belief, and we trust in His mercy and His providence and His love and everything that He's given to us. But I don't think that many times in our lives, folks aren't sure of what it means to trust in God. What does that look like? How does that work in our lives? Is trust some kind of an emotional state where we work ourselves up into, and by repetition of some verse or passage or some secret mantra or chant that we achieve a level of trust in who He is? Is it peace and serenity that we get to where nothing else bothers us? Some mindless state where we believe everything without questioning anything? Is it some kind of mindless conformity to an edict or a doctrine that does not give us any capacity to question or to wonder or to have doubts? I think if we think that faith and trust is living a life that's totally without any reservations or without any questions or without any anxiety, it's really not an accurate picture of what trust in the Lord is all about. There's a passage I'm going to read this morning from Psalm 118 that I think sort of speaks to this as we go forward. Psalm 118, I'll begin reading in verse 1. Give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His faithful love endures forever. Let Israel say, His faithful love endures forever. Let the house of Aaron say, His faithful love endures forever. Let those who fear the Lord say, His faithful love endures forever. I called to the Lord in distress. The Lord answered me and put me in a spacious place. The Lord is for me. I will not be afraid. What can man do to me? With the Lord for me as my helper, I will look in triumph on those who hate me. Then verse 8 and 9, sort of the core of our time this morning. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in nobles. I think real trust as it's revealed in Scripture is demonstrated in the life of Christ, that even though things were not always perfect and were not always the way we would think they ought to be, His faith was unwavering, and it preserved Him throughout all the things that we do. Trusting God, I think, has three major components. We have a belief in God, and that's what, in verse 1 of this passage that we looked at this morning, the psalmist is saying, give thanks to the Lord, for He is good. His faithful love endures forever. There is a profound sense of belief that He is going to be there no matter what. It's not a second-hand confession. It's not something we've learned from someone else. It is our belief. It is very personal. It's very intense. There's a belief followed by a faith in the Lord and what He's going to do. In verse 8, it says, it is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in man. It is better to take refuge in the one that is there, that we believe is there. We have faith that He's going to be available and show up for us. And then there's a confidence that comes from that. So you have this belief and faith followed by a confidence that the Lord is going to work in your life and to be there in your life. A confident knowledge born of experience shows us that even in difficult times we can persevere, and the Lord will be faithful to us in the midst of that. So many times I think trust is something that we feel that we have, that we think that we have, that we wish that we have, but then whenever it's really put to the test, we waver a little bit. I think many people feel they trust God, but they've never really examined what that statement means, what that truly means in their life, because they've never had a time when they've been tested on it, or when their faith has been severely put to the test, and they sort of wandered through and on a very cursory, very basic level, and then when we are called on to be faithful to who we are. And in times like this, when we face difficulties of an unprecedented sense, when we're not able to meet together as the church, whenever people are questioning what's happening around us, when there's dissension and division and all kinds of animosity, and people are getting scared and they're getting anxious and they're getting protective, and how do we respond to that? In the midst of all this, I think it's important that we focus on the fact that regardless of whatever's going on, our trust is in the Lord. And trust is something that no one else can give to you. You can be around people who trust, but ultimately you have to be the one. It is like if you're in a group of people who are on a zip line stand somewhere. You can trust that it will hold everybody else up, and you're fine with them going. But ultimately, it comes to a point where you have to put yourself in the harness, and you've got to step off the platform and trust that everything's going to work. So it's a very personal situation. It's not something that we can learn. We can see it in other people, and we can see it exhibited in their lives, and we can read about it, and we can be encouraged by it. But ultimately, it's us. It is our belief. It is what I think. Do I believe the Lord has good for me? Do I trust in His promises to me? Am I assured that even if everything else fails and if everyone else goes away, I am here? That's why the psalmist says, it is better to trust in the Lord, to place your refuge in Him, than in the things of man. Our trust in God is not based upon what He is going to do for us. It is based upon who He is. And I think if you remember nothing else or take nothing else from this time this morning, I think it's important to understand that the very basic premise of our faith is that we trust God because He is holy and righteous and always the same. We trust God because of who He is, not because of what we're going to receive from it. It is not an exchange where I say, Lord, I will trust you if you will do this for me. It's not a bargain. It's not something that we negotiate the terms of. We trust in Him because of who He is. Job says, though He slay me, yet will I trust in Him. And it's difficult to get to this point in our lives where our confidence is such that we trust God regardless, because we want a return on our trust. We're so conditioned to this idea that if I do something for you, you have to do something for me. And the Lord has promised much to us, but He is not held in a responsible position simply because I say I will trust you. Jesus Himself had a great trust for the Lord. He had a great confidence in what He was doing, but ultimately it led Him to the cross. So we, in our carnal thinking, would think that's not a very good bargain, because we trusted in God and He led us to this point. But the glory that would come as a result of that was immense, and the plan of the Lord worked out regardless. So as we face uncertainty, as we face difficulties, as we face problems in our life, we understand that the trust that we have comes not from what we are seeing immediately. It's not from the day. I don't trust God on a daily basis, because if I do, then there are days when my trust would be very limited because it's not a good day. I may be having aches and pains, or I may be in the midst of a crisis, or I may be in the midst of pain or illness or death. And so on those days, I can't say my trust in God is based on the immediate, because there's times I don't feel it. It's not something that I naturally produce. Trusting God is based on a confidence and an understanding of who He is, above all and in all. And we have to sort of take that ultimate understanding with us as we go through this life. Down through the years, there have been many who have shown examples of trust in God in the face of difficult situations. Paul says of course in 2 Timothy says, I know whom I have believed, and I am confident that he is able to keep that which I've entrusted to him against that day. I have confidence that he's able to do that. And that is a confidence not based on the immediate, but based on a profound belief. You see, the belief that we have, the trust that we have, is what carries us through those low points in our life. And we cannot depend on those to carry us in and of themselves. We can't depend on the situation. I wish that it were so that everything was always great and wonderful and everybody had a great day every day. Trust would be easy. Trust is hard whenever things are bad, whenever difficult things come our way. If you read the lives of great leaders through the years of Luther and John Wesley and Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Jim Elliot and countless others who have exhibited this trust in the midst of anarchy, in the midst of chaos, in the midst of pain, we see how it's expected of us. Great religion does not change lives. Great institutions do not change lives. Our faith does not begin with man and then work its way to God. We do not begin with what we are expected to do with society and with church culture and even with doctrine and believe it for what it is. Our trust in the Lord begins ultimately with Him. We have to understand the person of the one that we are worshiping. I think that's why it's so important that worship is a component of our life, because worship is when we ascribe worth to that which is greater than us. We note that there is a greater and more powerful being than us, and we worship that person. We worship Him because of who He is. Now, the Lord in His love and His mercy and His benevolence oftentimes will bless us and grant us so many things, but it's not a condition of our trust. There are folks this day who are going through much difficulty. There are people around the world who each day is a struggle. And for many of them, their faith is ever increased because it's not dependent upon the immediate. It's not dependent upon what's going on in us. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves and see if our trust was based on who He is or what we expected the Lord to do for us. Many people, I think, come to the Lord saying, Lord, I will give my life to you if you will promise me a life free of burdens and of concerns and cares. Whenever we were young, we were told to, trust God and all will be well. Well, that works really well until all is not well. And then we wonder what went wrong. Why am I not trusting enough? Is my faith not enough? What is going wrong that these things are happening to me? So it's not an understanding that everything's going to be great and everything's going to be rosy. Trust in God is made up of belief in Him, faith in Him, and confidence in Him. And that confidence is what transcends the moment. Many people, I think, in the church are disappointed when God does not respond as they wish He did, as they wish He would, as they expected Him to. So I think as we go through these dark days, and even though they may appear to be dark, there's been far worse. and there may be far worse yet in the future. If you study history, man has always given every option for evil to exist. He has taken every opportunity to be inhumane one to another, to be contrary to the things of God. So as we walk through these days, we should do it with a full, wide open expectancy of the potential for evil. The psalmist says, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. The psalmist says, I'm not removed from walking through the valley of the shadow of death, but I will do so with confidence. We face a time when we're called on to be the body, to be salt and light, to be the carriers of hope. Many people are going to have very difficult and uneasy times. And we can either add to their anxiety by saying, oh yeah, the sky's falling, terrible things are happening, people are terrible, they're buying up everything, they're hoarding stuff, all the things that we see people saying. Or, in the midst of that, we can acknowledge the reality of the situation, but say, through it all, I trust in God. Through it all, the Lord is good. He is my rock. He is my foundation. There are many things that are variable in this world, including you and I and every other person. We're all subject to failure. We're all subject to disappointment. My confidence is not in what I can do. It's what the Lord can do through me. Our faith is found in Him. We come to the point where in our lives where we have to decide where our trust is placed. Like the psalmist says, I choose to find refuge in God, not in the things of man. We follow the edicts of the government. We follow all the things that we should be doing. We don't hide ourselves from all the science and all the things that are around us. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that. But in doing those things, we do so understanding that the Lord is the one that I ultimately have trust in, because there will be a day when this life is over for me and for you. I told someone recently that in a sermon that I said, well, I want to tell you that the bad news is that I'm dying, and the worst news is that you are too. We're all in this process, and there's going to be a time when we stand before the Lord. So my trust is in Him. My trust and my confidence is in who He is. Like Paul, I know whom I have believed, and I am convinced that He is able to keep that which I've entrusted to Him against that day. That day, this day, or any day. Our trust is in Him. These are the kind of times when I think we have time and opportunity to examine where our trust lies. If you find that your trust lies in yourself, in another person, in an institution, in a particular church body, we may have to re-examine where those objects of our trust are. We find that those are failing, they're insufficient. I encourage you and I challenge you to maybe for the first time say that my trust is in the Lord, in who He is, in His sovereignty, His mercy, His love, His providence for me, in all that He is. In Him will I trust. Hope that y'all have a wonderful week. We'll look forward to talking to you again soon. God bless y'all. Same button.